Hello and welcome to the second session of the workshop, part 2, design. And I'm so excited to have you all here today. Now, we had quite a bit of an intro in the last session, but in this one, I want to jump right in. So I'm going to jump right in and we're going to start drawing right away. So if you can grab a piece of paper and something to draw with, this is a bit of a draw along. We're going to call it a quick draw, meaning we're going to do it super fast. So no stress about this. Don't worry. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this is for you, but I would love for you to share this in the Padlet if you can. Now, I'm going to be writing on an static, which is like a sticky note, but it uses static electricity to stick onto things. I just love that. And I'll be using, this is called a Neuland Find One outliner, which is sort of like a Sharpie marker. It's just like a permanent marker. And what I'm going to be asking you to do is two things. We're going to draw a very quick self-portrait, and that self-portrait can be just as simple as what I showed the other day. It can be literally a happy face if you want to give yourself hair. That's fine. I mean, you can make this as simple or as complicated as you want. And then I would like you to create just a quick statement. And again, your self-portrait can be as detailed or easy as you want. And then I want you to make a quick statement about how you plan or are using visuals in your work, okay? And this is going to be super quick. Like I would say, I don't even have my timer on. If you don't mind, Mary, could you put on a 3-minute timer? A lot of times when I draw, I usually start with the eyes. That's just me. But you're going to be drawing yourself. And Mary, if we have anyone coming in, joining us a little bit later, you might just put in the chat what we're doing. It's just a quick draw with the quick self-portrait and then your statement of how you are using AI and visuals in your work, either currently or in the future. Okay, we've got about a minute left. And then one of the things, if you want to draw a box around your words, like a speech bubble or a thought bubble, just a couple of things to remember when we're writing speech bubbles and thought bubbles. A speech bubble, what I like to do is I like to draw the little caret first, or the little part that's pointing to whoever is speaking. I make that fairly small compared to the box that I'm making around the letters. And so I make that small, do my vertical line if it's coming from the side, and then 2 parallel lines, and then just close that off. Or you can leave it open, whatever you'd like. But that little caret could be pretty small. And then for a thought bubble, I usually do like a small circle, and then maybe a larger circle, and then an even larger circle, 3 of those. And then I go small, big, till I bring it back around. And that's more of a thought bubble. And the rule in terms of making these are write your words first and then write your speech bubble, because sometimes what will happen is you will draw a speech bubble and then your words won't fit inside. And if you're using different colors or different size markers, then I would say, because right now I'm just using all black, I would probably draw myself in black, write my words in black, and then maybe make the speech bubble either in a very, very light color or a smaller marker nib. So that's just wanted to get our hands warmed up and our thoughts thinking about visuals and appreciative inquiry. And this is just your quick self-portrait. So again, you don't have to share it, no worries, but I did want to invite you, if you wanted to share it in the Padlet. And I've put mine in the Padlet. If you wanted to share that, it's just a nice thing. And I also wanted to give you some examples of what I've done in the past so that you can also see those as well. So let me show you how far you can take this type of work. So this particular one I actually drew. I had a picture of myself and then I traced it. So that took a while. And I did that prior to a meeting that I was in. But I was in a meeting where we were having a team kickoff meeting. This was a brand new team. We were just getting to know each other. And so I had this picture of myself. And as everyone else was talking and I was listening to sort of what they were sharing, I started to put together some of the things that I wanted to share about myself. So you'll see that in the yellow behind me here, these are the things that I truly, truly love. I also talked about my strengths and where I've had some of my training and some of the roles that I play. Then I got into the no kidding, because this was a really wonderful, vulnerable group. What are some of my triggers? What are some of the things that kind of get me, going and just being just wanted to talk and share about that and being authentic. I also talk about what people sometimes get wrong about me, maybe some assumptions about me, and then what I'm working on, and then what I also appreciate. And so this was a really interesting meeting that I had because it allowed me to give sort of a visual self-portrait while everyone was just sort of talking about themselves. They loved it. Then they all wanted a copy of it because one of them said, this really helped us understand how to best work with you. Right. So I loved being able to share that. And a lot of sketchnoters and other visual practitioners will create these visual, you can call them visual bios, visual self-portraits, just to let other people know this is who I am. And so that might be something that if you wanted to take this a little bit further from, just the simple stick figure or whatever you drew to something a little bit more to help other folks know how to best work with you. And then if you wanted to take it to a whole nother level where you're saying, okay, these are my actual service offerings, you can turn what it is you do into an infographic. And so this is an infographic that was on my website. I think I put it together about the same time I was becoming a visual practitioner. Now, I'd been a graphic designer for a while. And so in this case, I had that background to be able to create something like this. But I really wanted to show clients what was in my visual toolbox and what were some of the newer things that I was offering as a visual practitioner and what that meant. And so here you'll see I have graphic facilitation, graphic recording, custom templates, custom graphics and chart work, Prezi presentations, and scribe videos. And these were all different types of offerings that I could offer. I talked about where those could be best used. In the middle here, I'm talking about where do we pull information from people in the room and where are we pushing information out, which might be more like marketing. Below that, you've got a couple of little pie charts, and this talks about what are some of the roles in terms of how many people, how many different types of people does it take to pull this off? You'll see Scribe Videos takes a lot of different roles to be able to pull this off. And then what's the impact that this is having? Are we going to have deep impact for a handful of people, or are we going to have, we're going to affect a lot of people by pushing that information out there? Thank you, Mary, for putting the Padlet in the chat. Feel free if you want to post your self-portrait, it would be great to be able to see that. Yeah, thanks. And then but at the bottom here, I talk about when to use these particular visuals and what the frequency is. And so you'll see some of the things that I do, like Prezi presentations or custom templates. At the time, I wasn't doing a lot of those. I was doing a lot more graphic recording and graphic facilitation, and I was encouraging folks to have that in every single meeting. And so this became sort of my visual resume, if you will. And I've put in the Padlet, and I will also share that so that you can all see, because I want you to know that in the Padlet is where I am going to be putting a lot of information, and I want to invite all of you to be able to do that too. So we didn't really talk much about the sustainability garden. I think I just talked about how instead of a parking lot, I put sustainability garden at the top of my chart, and encourage people to put ideas there that may not be relevant or directly relevant to whatever we're talking about. We went over some of these graphics last week for the dream phase. And then I just want to let you know that we have additional resources. You can grab those off of the Google Drive. So if for some reason you lose an email, you can always come to the Padlet and see what I'm posting here. There's my hand-drawn self-portrait. And then I talk a little bit about the digitally drawn bio so that you can see that. And then if you wanted to create your infographic as a visual toolbox, like what I've done type of thing, then I just go over some very high level steps. I will tell you, I'm a bit of a slow thinker when it comes to all of this kind of data and putting it all together. So it took me about a month to kind of compile and arrange and how I wanted that to look. I mean, it wasn't full time, of course, but I took some time to really think about what I wanted that to look like. And it's been a wonderful tool that's served me for about 6 years now, and I haven't made any changes to it. So, but just wanted to give you some tips if you wanted to follow those. So any questions so far about these visuals before we dive right into our activities today? Okay. I also just want to, yeah, did somebody have a question? Okay. I also wanted to point out that now is a really great time that we're really getting into the design phase, which is my favorite phase, is getting into the AI principles. And so there are a couple of principles that I sort of identified with when it came to thinking about creating that visual self-portrait or that visual bio. And the first one is the constructionist principle, which is words create worlds. Reality as we know it is a subjective and objective state and is socially created through the language and our conversations. And I would say that that's also possible through visuals. And so by showing who you are, and I know that many of you posted your portraits, your photos, your actual photos of yourself, and your a little bit about yourself, your elevator pitch in the Padlet, and that's wonderful. But also to have those visuals to say, this is who I am, can also be equally as powerful. And thank you, Mary, for putting the principles, a link to the principles. I also believe that doing this is sort of an enactment principle. So we're satisfying the enactment principle by saying, here's what we're going to do with visuals. Acting as if is self-fulfilling. So in order to make this change and start incorporating visuals into our work, just act as if and become that change, and as if you're living into that ideal future. All right. And then another one, and there are several principles, and I'd love for you to be thinking about some of these principles today as I show you some visuals and think, okay, how can this lead in? Because what I like to do once I'm finished with the design phase is look at those principles and say, okay, are they included in the design portion? And if so, can we really live into that? And that might be inspiration for me or setting tone for me as a facilitator for when I go to deliver that. And then finally, the free choice principle. Free choice liberates power. I just love this. People perform better and are more committed when they have the freedom to choose how and why they contribute. And I just love that we can use visuals in so many different ways. So are there any other principles, if you're familiar with them, that you would add? And it's okay if there aren't, because there's several and I kind of picked the three. Yeah, Deborah.
I guess I was just thinking about the anticipatory principle, that you're already creating what you hope to accomplish, and and using visuals that you're creating, and also leads into positivity. Like, you're already setting the precedent that I have this intention that our time together is going to turn out well.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a great addition.
Or energy, I guess, and positive energy.
Yes, thank you. And pretty soon you'll start to see that you can pull a lot of principles in, right? So sometimes I'll have one and I'll think, "Oh my gosh, all 8 principles are right here." And it's like, "Okay, if I were to really narrow it down and think of 3, that kind of helps me focus a bit." And Frederico is asking, "Who is the author of these principles?" That is an excellent question. Now, I know that these are on the Appreciative Inquiry website, and the primary principles, I don't know if those were authored by David Cooper Ryder. If anyone in the room knows, I trust there's great knowledge in the room to know where these may have come from. But the additional ones actually came through working the process. I think they came from many different facilitators. Does anyone know?
Yes, they were developed by Cooper Ryder. The original ones were. The emergent ones just emerged, like you said, through the practice.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, though, I think what comes up for me, it's like choosing like your favorite child, right? It's hard. But I think for in the context of this course, I think the, just the, oh my goodness, the, sorry, I just had it. That, the whole image theory. So like kind of building off of the image inspires action. I think that that's really true here because, when we have engaged in meetings with clients, there's a lot of communication, which is great, but that visual, creating that visual for that person, I think helps to just remove any barriers that they might perceive that are there, because then they can see it. And when they can see it, I just feel like it really just inspires action.
I love that you said that. Thank you so much, Melissa. And again, a reminder to everyone, feel free to go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen to go to gallery view if you want to see everyone. I am going to just keep myself spotlighted just for the recording so that you have that. Yeah, Frederico, I noticed that you're unmuted. Did you have something to add?
Yes, yes. And as a matter of fact, what I'm working on right now, that's where I asked the question. So I think that we need more organic structure. I don't know how to put it, about the appreciative inquiry and see it from the methodological perspective that we had been emphasizing mainly as practitioners to the paradigmatic perspectives. For me, appreciative inquiry is a paradigm. It's more than a methodology. So, and here we are. An article is going to be published very soon in the journal on this issue. So here we are, and that's what I bring them, even though that doesn't relate that much to the designing issue. But yes, I have a very interesting, maybe I would put it as you suggested, Heather, in the Padlet, the design that I have done for the appreciative paradigm. So the appreciative paradigm is the overarching concept. And under that, we have the components, which is first the ontology, which is what is our idea of man and human behavior in the social and natural world in which we are. That's what concept of man we have, human being we have, social systems. That's the first thing. The next thing, very quickly, is the epistemology, which is about how we get to know the subject of our work, which is man and the social world. It's very rough the way I'm saying in the article is more deeper and well supported, citing Cooper Ryder also, who doesn't use this term at all, but he is already insinuating in the last publication that appreciative inquiry is moving to the paradigmatic level. And then we have the practice of this paradigm, which is what we have been doing, and it has been the most developed. But the reserve dimension has been kind of forgotten a little bit, I will say, a little bit. But that was the intentional first thing that Cooper Ryder wanted to do, is to create an applied research method and that's what it was. But then we are not working on coming this back. And then it comes the axiology. What are the kind of values that our paradigm believes in, if you want to put it? And then for me, the language. A new paradigm has a new language. So there are these, when we talk about principles, I can see that if we will create this new framework, theoretical framework, more organic, we will be able to see, but because the paradigms, the principles that you name go in many different directions, but we have principles in terms of beliefs, we have principles in terms of practice, we have principles in terms of beliefs about the human being, ontology. I don't want to go ahead with that, but I'm asking, I ask this question just because when we talk about principles, you see, they are very dispersed.
Yes.
But I think these principles, we can structure, that will be very interesting for you, Heather. I'm sorry for being asking you to visualize these things, how these principles, where these principles fit, are related to the language, are related to the concept of man that we have, are related to the practice, are related to research, are related, and that's what I'm just suggesting. And I will stop here. And
okay, thank you, Federico. I have a few questions for you because I would love for you to share if you're willing to share on the Padlet. I know I would love to read it. But a few questions. Did you work with Cooper Writer directly to write your paper?
No, never. No,
okay.
I have been developing my work, reading his work and teaching. I have been teaching this class for more than 10 years at the university.
Okay.
I teach appreciative inquiry as a research method. And that is what I'm fighting. We have to take appreciative inquiry to the university as a research method for social and human sciences. And that is what I'm working, and that's what I'm proposing.
Great. Well, we would love to be able to read that too. So thank you so much for sharing that. Great. And I just want to do a quick go back on what Melissa was saying. I hope I know that I won't be able to capture how eloquently she said it, but she was talking about how, to me, the way I equate it was visuals can be sort of a universal language. It can help us see what's been said, it gets put out there, and then we have something to work with. I don't know if you can repeat what you said, Melissa, but I have a bit of a story to go along with that.
No, I think you did it better than I did.
No. But you were talking about it, and it reminded me of one of the very first times that I experienced watching someone do graphic recording, and actually it was graphic facilitation. And the reason why I say it was the difference between graphic recording and graphic facilitation is graphic recording is someone who's writing maybe at the front or the side of the room where people can see, but they're not saying anything. And what was happening is there was this conversation that was going on. It was getting really heated, and people were talking over each other. And my partner jumped up and said, "Hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm capturing what you're saying, because you're all talking really fast and over each other." And I thought, what a great way to slow down and start to shift the conversation. And he started drawing, and we didn't have a whiteboard in the room. He started drawing on a window because that's all he had. And so he started drawing on a window with some dry erase markers. And he said, "Is this what you're saying?" And it quieted everyone, got them to thinking rather than reacting. And one person said, "No, this is what it is." And someone else jumped in and said, "Yes, and this, yes, and." And it became this almost improvisational inquiry that was happening. And it was such a beautiful thing to be able to take a visual, as simple as writing down some words and a few pictures in front of everyone, to shift and change the feeling and the mode of the conversation, if that makes sense. So I'm glad what you said, Melissa. I just wanted to share that story because I think that's something that each one of us has the power to do. And if you do happen to be in front of the room and you find that someone's getting really frustrated, or if they're having a hard time explaining themselves, and especially if they're talking a lot with their hands, oftentimes I will hand them the marker and say, can you help us understand this a little bit better? And when we put when we put a marker in someone's hand, it really gives them the power. It's like handing a baton over. You can still hold the space in the room for everyone, but by giving someone a way to express themselves is a really can be a powerful way, an important way to do this work. So I just wanted to share that with you because it kind of also talks a little bit about what Federico is speaking about, having an organic way of doing this. When I first learned appreciative inquiry, I didn't know if I was going to become certified, wasn't sure if that was on the table. I just wanted to learn the methodology, and that was very helpful. And I went back to work and I found all these sort of guerrilla ways of using appreciative inquiry that was really, really helpful. But I wasn't in a situation where I could have a true AI summit in a very formatted way. But I do use the 5D process in all of my work. And is it done structurally in order? Well, I'm teaching it in order here, but it doesn't always happen that way in the design and the delivery of the actual session. So just wanted to reiterate some of those things that we shared. Good. Does anyone else have anything to add? And then I'll get started and talk about our why today.
I would just add the
The
narrative.
final thing,
Oh,
Melissa,
sorry,
the final
Kelly.
thing, just
I'm sorry.
Kelly.
Let's do Kelly first and then Federico. Yes, Kelly?
Yes,
I was going to say,
just quickly.
thank you. The narrative principle, when you showed your self-portrait, your whole story was there for me visually to take in, and I felt like I knew you even better and so quickly. So for me, the story of you was right there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And that's it. It can be just as simple as a stick figure in a statement and, however you see yourself or how you could portray yourself. Yeah, thank you for noticing that. And Federico.
Just finally answering about the last question is precisely, that's the beauty of appreciative inquiry of, as I call it, the appreciative paradigm. That is very inclusive, is in the making. Even Cooper Ryder acknowledged that, it's in the making. All of us can contribute, creating principles. So no, the principles of appreciative inquiry come from Cooper Ryder.
Right.
That's not true. Appreciative inquiry is something that is the product of so many people. So that's beautiful. So
Yes.
here we are.
Yes.
Maybe we can create a new principle. And
I'm glad you're saying that. Yes, absolutely.
I think,
because I'm going to be asking you today, this is just for us to learn. Now, Federico, I would say that you above probably, and I don't want to say anyone in this class, but others who are just coming to appreciative inquiry, those principles are a way for us to help us shape our thinking, to help us begin to understand that paradigm. So you're right in that there could be a lot more emergent principles, but I do want you to be keeping in mind those principles today and some of your own and start articulating what those are, because that's where I believe it becomes so powerful to add those AI and visuals, because visuals can live on their own without being appreciative, and appreciative inquiry can live on its own without being visual. But when we bring those together with the mindset of principles, we really do have some powerful workings in order. So excellent. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen today. Our purpose, we talked about this last week, of this 3-week course is to learn practical applications of integrating appreciative inquiry and visuals into meeting design. That's pretty basic. But today, I want you to experience a visual template firsthand and create customized templates for your own that support your client's desired outcomes. And we're going to have some chance in the second half of this session for us to really, what I like to call freestyle. I want you to bring me some of your instances where you think I need a visual here. What would that look like? And I will start to draw it up for you. And I don't have anyone no one's emailed me ahead of time, so I have no idea what you're going to throw at me. So it's going to be kind of fun. And then our process today, we've already done the quick draw, that self-portrait and intention. I'm going to show you, it's a go back from what Anne requested last week, some key takeaway compositions. I would love for you to experience a needs assessment based on the Alive model that was designed by Jeannie and Joan. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then I want us to use visuals to support that facilitated process. So that's where I'm really going to be freestyling and asking for your input. And then I'll create some example templates for you and to be able to meet those desired outcomes. All right. And so hopefully today, the payoff is that you will walk away with more visual templates and inspiration to customize your own meetings to meet your clients' desired outcomes. And so let's do that quick go back from Anne. Thank you so much. You were saying what's a great way to just pull out some of those key takeaways as we move after a meeting. So this is actually a page composition handout that I created for a class that I teach called Learn to Sketchnote. And I will ask Mary to please put a link to that in the chat. And of course, all of this is going to be available to you as well in that Google Drive. But there are 3 here. And the first 2, now keep in mind that I teach a class, Learn to Sketchnote, that is specifically for learners, people who want to take visual notes for themselves, not specifically for graphic recorders or facilitators. So the very first one, this is around people who want to learn lettering. There's a layout for that. There's a step-by-step layout if you wanted to learn things in order of something. And then this last one over here on the right is about freestyling. And it's just, now I'm going to talk about this just for a second, because this might be something you use if you want to do your own graphic or your own sketchnoting or taking notes. Is the things that you're going to want to include is a title, whoever the presenter or instructor is, and the date, maybe the location so that you have a sense of space. And then if you want, you can put the page number. And I just have the social media handle down here, because oftentimes as a learner, when I'm in a workshop, I will take sketch notes, I'll walk away and I'll come back. And I mean, I just walked away to get a snack or use the restroom, and I'll come back and people are taking pictures of my notes. And I'm thinking, well, if those go and live somewhere, I'd love for them to have at least my social media handle. Okay, so the one thing that I would recommend that you could do, and what I have here on the left here is just a picture of a certain type of calligraphy pen. But if you did want to take some notes for yourself, visual notes, this one composition may help you. And it's divided into 4 main sections. At the top, you have the title, maybe the presenter, whoever the instructor is. At the bottom, again, the date, the location, maybe your social media or something, and the page number. But on the left, this is where you're going to take a majority of your notes. These could be drawings, they could be detailed notes. But then on the right, I would say choose one of any of these 3. And these are going to be your key points, your high level takeaways, whatever those are, or, and this is something we'll cover in the next session, your learn, do, thank. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently due to what you just learned, and what are you thankful for? And so just having, like, even if it's a really messy notes that you've taken for yourself, just look at it for a second before you close that sketchbook or walk away from the meeting and say, if I were to pull away something that I can either appreciate, that are key points, high level takeaways that I learned, write those down there, because that helps solidify, and it's sort of a mnemonic practice to write those down before you move on. So I don't know if Anne is on the call today, but I just want to make sure that made the recording. Okay, any questions about that? All right. And it looks like Mary actually put 2 things in the chat. I think the first one was the handout for the design phase, and you should have that already. I put that in a follow-up email. And the second one is for the sketchnote page compositions. And Mary, next time, if you could just write what those are for, that would be great. All right. So what I would like to do now is really talk about, do a quick review in the dream. Now, we didn't have a lot of time to do this last week, but I want you to experience this because I think it's very important. And I'm going to introduce to you a visual template that was inspired by the Alive model, and that's by Joan MacArthur Blair and Jeannie Cockle. They are the authors of the book, Building Resilience with Appreciative Inquiry. And I think I may have talked about it either last week, or I talked about it in one of the the pre-sessions. And so building resilience with appreciative inquiry, a leadership journey through hope, despair, and forgiveness. And if you don't mind putting that in the chat, that would be great, Mary. I highly recommend this book. They also teach a course, which I took last month. The reason why I've adapted this model for the dream phase is because I have a client who wants to dive right into the process of improving collaboration amongst their team. So let me just bring that up now so that you can see it. I want to make sure that you've got access to that. And let me switch my camera so that looks better. There we go. So what I did is I asked my client what they needed. And they came up just in general in the discovery phase, and they came up with some common themes like building trust, getting over anger and angst around decisions that were made without their consent. They talked about what they needed in order to be productive. And we know as change agents that people don't change just because they are told to, right? That they need time and space to understand and align their needs and desires to their organization or to whatever the initiative it is. So, but once that trust is broken, we all know that it takes time to rebuild, even if at all. So I came up with a simple visual template that aligns with the Alive model to help my client. And the reason why I chose the Alive model specifically is because it really works with those who have found themselves in a place of despair or have experienced trauma. And so it's a very caring, loving, living type of model. And so in this session, I'd like to use the same approach to determine your needs before we move into that design phase. So the purpose of this is for both of us, for you and me, to best understand your needs when it comes to learning and integrating how to use appreciative inquiry and visuals in your work. And you can be as general or specific as you feel comfortable. So what I'd like you to do is to reflect on what initially inspired you to sign up for this course, or what is most relevant to you today. And I'm going to read off these questions and ask you to pick one or more to focus on. Choose the ones where the answers come really easy to you. And I'm going to ask you to write for 3 minutes to answer as many of these questions for yourself as possible. And you may want to use a pencil or pen or type in like either notes or a Word document, just so that you have those down. Because I'm going to ask you to distill those down, because we all know if you have 3 minutes to write, I'm not going to give you 3 minutes to talk. I'm going to have you distill that down into some very simple words. So as an adult learner, adding new skills to your toolbox, I'd like you to consider these 5 questions. What do you need in order to feel that your ideas are valued and appreciated? And you're welcome to start writing now, or just listen and think about this, feel into it. What do you need in order to feel your learning process is supported and cared for? So when you think of these needs, notice what's coming up for you. What questions can you ask to get the clarity that you need? And if you get stuck in the process, what will you do to brave this storm? Meaning, if you don't know how to draw something or don't know how to inquire appreciatively, what will you do? Or what are some of your strengths you will pull from in order to get you back on track? Okay. And then what do you need to inspire you to expand and be open to possibilities? So looks like good. Mary's already started the timer. You've got 3 minutes. Write in response to one or more of these questions. But before we begin, does anybody have any clarifying questions? Okay, let's go. Okay, you have about 30 seconds left. Again, try to answer as many questions as you can, or dive deep into just one. Okay, now I'd like you to take a moment to reflect on what you wrote and distill down what you are willing to share with the group. And I only want one, and maybe not everyone has to share. That's fine if you don't feel comfortable, but just want you to choose one area. And if you could just distill that down into a few words. Then I'll ask who would like to share. Well, let me give you a moment. Yeah, we've got a timer on. Thanks, Mary.
Can I go?
Yes, if someone's ready to go, I would say go. I just want to yeah. So again, we don't have to go in any order at all. Let's just go where the energy wants to go. So yes, Melissa.
All right, so what do you need in order to feel your learning process is supported and cared for? For me, I need time to process information and for reflection. And so when a person provides me the space or the time to process what they're saying and truly be able to give an authentic response, it's that time piece. And so if you're asking for an answer on the spot, it's like that paralysis.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And I don't know that I have given that kind of time in this class because there's so much to cover. But I would certainly invite anyone to say, hey, can we have a moment to reflect on that? I'm game. Yeah. Good. Thank you, Melissa. Angela, I notice you're unmuted. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, on the first question, what do you need to inspire you to expand and be open to possibilities? For me, it's knowing that what I'm doing can help make a difference with groups that I'm working with. Just that's satisfying and fulfilling to me. And then the other thing is seeing cool products that come out of it. Like I like to look at a piece of paper and say, "Ooh, that's really cool. I like the end results." So that inspires me.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that.
I can add to that
Uh-huh.
same question. For
Uh-huh.
me, the answer is I need to be always open and patient because I cannot control. I have experienced this almost every day. I cannot control when I will be able to come with a new idea, new way of saying things, but I know that I have to do something and be patient because when in least you expected, that thing that you are dreaming, thinking about happens in terms of getting the answer, the eureka. So that's what I
Yes.
said. Be open and patient.
Thank you. Who else can relate to that or have something to add? Thank you, Frederico.
Thank you.
Mhm.
For me, I would add to that one a sense of camaraderie. I
Mhm.
do a lot of things on my own, and I enjoy it. I enjoy that, but I also enjoy being able to do things with others in
Yeah.
a sense of, supporting one another, mentoring one another, very fluid roles, right? But, it's all happening and we're all doing that in ways that enhance the outcomes.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah. So working with, learning with, teaching, mentoring others. Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add to any of the other areas? Deborah.
I guess reflecting on braving the storm.
Mhm.
I think staying focused on the learning objectives and giving enough time to absorb and practice.
Mhm.
I'm not a drawer, but I'm an aspiring drawer.
Yay.
And so maybe just always looking for commitment from the group to hold us all accountable to staying focused on what you're teaching us today.
Yeah, that is very important. And also, yes, thank you for that. And also that time and practice. And so that also comes from this is the challenging part. I don't know how many of you, if you're like me, I buy books and then sometimes read a few chapters and then think that I've got it mastered. Hello. No, that person went through an entire life journey to write that book and I only got the first few chapters. Or I buy a online course and I attend or maybe watch the recordings later and then don't really do the work. Does that happen to anybody else? So although I am not going to be here in your email inbox every single week reminding you to do something, you do have to put the time and the effort into that. And when it comes to learning to listen, the drawing, the lettering, all of those take committed, valuable time. And yes, you do have to prioritize. And we're going to talk about prioritization a little bit later. But we do have to make that time and practice. So Susanna, you have something to add or a question?
I think I was trigger happy. I just wanted to add an idea for one of
Yeah.
the other circles if you have time. It's a good time right now, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to thank Deborah for saying that. And
Yeah.
I think we all can take some reflection in terms of how committed do we want to be to this. And if you have questions about how long is it going to take me to learn how to do this? And that's why I like to teach via templates, because you can use your own handwriting to be able to capture some of these great ideas. But go ahead, Susanna. Thank you.
Thank you. And it does spin off from what Deborah was saying. So thanks, Deborah, for that. I'd like to share about the inquire stage. And I think I really like that because to me, it was a question about self-accountability. In my love part, I had put that something what I need is clear and specific examples, not just abstract. And so in regards to the question of what questions can I ask to get clarity of what I need? What came up for me is that I can just ask for specific examples, but I can also think of my own projects and ask those questions internally for myself, right? So I can externally ask questions, but then I can also ask myself, okay, let's think of a project and then go through it too so that I can help myself through my learning.
That's right. I did not pay Susanna to say that, but she knows enough about the visual world to know that there is limitless kinds of applications to this work that we could be using. And so being reflective, understanding your own needs, what's
Mhm.
relevant right now, that's really critical. Thank you. Yeah. Anything anyone else has to add to that or reflections to
I
that?
see Melissa has a hand.
Oh,
Yes, and
Melissa, yes.
it actually does build off of Susanna's thing, which is and it kind of ties back into my needing time to process because sometimes there's a lack of understanding. So I often will ask, well, what does that look like for you? Could you paint a picture for me? Because I'm neurodivergent. So images really, really help me. So if you can help paint that image, kind of what we were talking about earlier, it helps me get on the same page as you and understand what's being asked of me.
Do you have any specific questions right now?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
that's
just
in
other
general.
like, what would that look like? Or what does that
Yes.
look like for you?
Yeah. Is that sort of getting into the how? So making this going from an abstract concept to how do we actually put this to work? Or do you have another way you would say that?
No, I guess it would be the doing. That's a good question. I'd have to reflect.
Yeah. Yeah. But it does. So what happens is we hear an idea and then something, I call it the spidey sense, or something happens, comes alive in us and we go, oh, I want to know more about that. But hold on a second, I need to process it. It's like you have to take this physical feeling that's happening, put it through your brain and then, sometimes we can get stuck there. So sometimes it's important to be able to say, okay, help by painting a picture. Give me some more information. And so that's why I went into that how, and as you stated, the doing part, what might this look like, right? And so immediately as learners, and you're adult learners, and you're here for something very specific, I'm asking you again to experience things. And then also at the high level, how would you use this in your practice? And that's a great thing to do, is bounce between those two to help you ask your questions. Yeah. Good. Anyone else have anything to add? Yeah, Federico.
Yeah, just to complete the figure that we have there under appreciate. Honestly, Heather, my answer is answering to the question that is to the right next to it. Use visual aids. That's what I think I need to add to so my ideas are valued and appreciated. Honestly, I think visual aids is a major thing that we need to do in order to have people value and appreciate what we think, what we write, what we talk about.
So are you saying you need others to, or you're saying that
Visual
visuals?
aids, I will write under appreciate. What do you need in order to feel your ideas are valued and appreciated? That's what I think, in my case, that I need to add more visual aids. What you are doing here right now, this is so powerful for us to value and appreciate what you are talking about. If you wouldn't have these visual aids in front of us, the way you are doing it, I don't think we will be able, at least me, I won't be able to value what you are teaching us right now.
Right, because it would just be talking, and those words can be felt and heard, but in order to be able to see what other folks are saying can be very powerful as well, right? Yeah.
Yes, it's the beauty of, it's just the beauty of looking at this in itself. That's the value. That's the power.
Yes, and it only took a few minutes for us to get there, and we could spend a lot more time on this. Yeah. Yes.
For you, I wish I have this skill. This is amazing.
Well, that's why you're taking the class. You're going to get some ideas and then hopefully implement those. Antonio,
yes, I'm starting.
Okay. I'm very appreciative that you can feel and appreciate the value of this. Antonio, you have something to add or questions?
Yeah. No, hi. Sorry for being late, by the way. Had a pretty hectic day.
That's okay.
Yeah, to contribute to what Federico said, honor our stories. Sometimes when we share our ideas, we forget that a way to appreciate, and I see appreciation also with the connection, right? And when we talk about ideas, but also the stories that come behind them, I think we are more appreciative, not just for the idea itself, but for the thinking behind, or the moment we felt, the emotion we had, you know? So I think the stories, more so now that I've been studying some about storytelling, about Brené Brown says that, you know, we need to be more like story stewardess, you know? We need to honor the stories, believing them, you know? So I think stories are a key part of appreciating ideas, appreciating our own ideas, honoring our own stories and others' ideas.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I love what both you and Federico said, because Federico is both of you are bringing it back up to the balcony. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And so this is a very quick exercise, but I think that many of you have felt this pretty deeply. And I think that what's important here is to notice that a needs assessment is so important, to go from the dream phase where we were dreaming and idling, thinking of all these things, and bring this into the design phase. It's such a key piece in gathering the information that you've learned so far from your client. And what you were saying, Antonio, about Brené Brown, and especially storytelling, is that it allows us to be vulnerable so that we can build that trust in order to do that meaningful work. And that's exactly what my client was wanting. So that's where these questions came from. The Alive model is a model on its own. This was inspired by the Alive model. So if you want to learn more, again, I'm going to point you to Joan and Jeannie. I just took that model and said, I want this to be a deep experience, but I want to share with you another visual that you can certainly take with you. And let me get this up. And this is a very simple, again, this one is inspired by Ben Carruthers of Presto Sketching. And that's another great resource if you want to learn about drawing. He has a book called Presto Sketching that is excellent. And a couple of things that I'm just going to write down here, and I want you to build on it if you can, is that in order for us to really design something that's going to meet the needs of the group and their desired outcomes, you're going to want to design an agenda visually that helps folks see, that helps them hear, helps them know and understand, only because it's a really big word and don't have another place to put it. But you also want them to be able to feel, right? You're also going to want to give them opportunities for them to give or share, and to also receive, right? What else comes up? Can you think of anything else as you're getting ready to plan an agenda? You've just learned about what their wants, needs, and desires are. Maybe you've even distilled it down to a desired outcome or a purpose. What else might they need? You may think of something specific that pertains to your client. I kind of covered a lot of them. Is there anything else that comes up?
So
What's that?
Action.
Action. Okay, action. And Deborah?
we try to celebrate successes, leaning into identifying what's working.
Yes. That was my next question. How will we know if we've done it, if we've met the needs, and how do we celebrate, right? We can say celebrate our successes. It can also, that can either come at the beginning, at the end, it can come in many different forms, but celebrating the successes is excellent.
Context. I was remember about, because the white space that's around the person also is important, the
Yes,
context
so you're
around
saying
that person.
context.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Good.
I would also say time. Melissa and I work together and we share that. We both, like, I'm a rest and digest kind of a person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Right.
good. Good. Excellent.
What's
Any-
surfacing for me would be like space. I know that in appreciative inquiry, we're all about, even like there's the whole design space theory about how are we going to, if we're doing a meeting, how are we going to set up the space so that it's conducive for collaboration?
And now we are going right into the logistics, right? Now we're getting into design. So already you're thinking about design. And so let me show you how we're going to approach this
Heather?
next part. Yes.
And I don't know if you're going to jump into this, but we always start off with appreciative agreements about how we will create a safe and brave space. And that
Okay.
comes from the people.
Yep,
So
that's right.
I think that's super important. I don't even start a meeting without that.
That's right. And that's actually design. Now we're already into design. So we're finishing up. So you are all ready to go into it. So let me just show you. No, don't apologize. This is why doing a needs assessment is so important, because what you're doing is you're taking all of those concepts that we talked about in the dream phase, and now we're going to bring it down into something concrete. And as soon as you start talking about these needs, and maybe you ask them, or maybe you're asking yourself, what kind of exercise do we need to put in there in order to meet those desired outcomes? People are like popcorn, and some people are going to get right to that how, right? So that's fantastic. So I love that you're already there. We're going to get to that. Looks like Matt has written acknowledgement and validation for the value that they already have and bring with them. Yes, exactly. So let me just add validation. And then I'm going to skip over because you're all ready to do the design phase. And so let me just do this one thing, and then we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to share my desktop so that you can see we're going back to our visual agenda here. Oops, wrong camera. Sorry about that. I have too many cameras. Okay, here we go. All right. And so, so where we started in that discover phase is we just drew a few, we just drew some icons. Then we started getting into some templates, right? Here's the needs assessment piece right here. And we need to be able to gather this information so that we can jump into the design phase. Melissa talked about logistics. This is really important that we've got to be able to get those. We talked about visual templates, and we're going to talk more about those today, specifically around meeting the needs of the client and the desired outcomes. But we also want to be able to figure out, okay, how are we going to be managing the energy of the group? And there's different ways to do that. You can use visuals with that. You can also do that in how you're managing how groups are gathered. So when are we in plenary? When are we in pairs, triads, small groups? All of those things can go into the design, and your visual templates can support each of those different types of ways that we get together. Great. So Matt is also saying inspired from integral model concept, transcend and include. Excellent. All right. So that's just a quick overview of how we're going to jump into the design phase, and we're going to do that when we get back from break. I do want to ask everyone that before you go, if you have an example agenda or an exercise that you would like me to review or co-create a visual template, please just type in the chat that you have something. Maybe if you have a little bit of a clue, say I want to work on a, fill in the blank, go ahead and put that in the chat, and I will triage that a little bit and figure out what we want to do. I do have something that I can share with you if we don't have enough examples to share, but I would rather get really down and dirty specific with all of you, roll up our sleeves and go through a couple of these customizations. And also want to remind you that on Monday, we have one more office hour for 2 hours that I'm happy to go through and customize for folks as well, if you want a little bit more personal intention. Okay, so Mary, if you don't mind putting on a 5-minute timer, and I will, Mary, do you have music, or would you like me to throw on some music? Okay, I will throw on some music, and then we will come back in 5 minutes and give me some of your examples. All right, see you soon. Fastest break ever, right? I feel like it is. Great. So I had a few private messages of scenarios, and feel free to continue to send those to me, either private or public would be great too. Before we get into these customizations, I do want to do a follow-on from the visual template that we talked about last time, Distill the Essence. So let me share that so that you can see. Remember, it was a bit of a messy thing, but it seemed like folks really liked it. It was like, oh yeah, okay. So we can see how this very simple graphic of a funnel turned into taking a lot of different ideas, pulling them through that funnel by setting the criteria. And I talked about some things that were pretty, I would say, generic or common. And then you came up with some other ones too to consider. And then what actually got through either all of them, most of them, or were also maybe a really great idea that we could explore next time, right? So the next part of this process, once we know what that was getting to that desired outcome, but now as we get into the design phase, it's sort of like, okay, now we've got all of these ideas. Maybe this happens in an actual meeting. Maybe you use it just in the dream phase. It's totally up to you. This can be used in other ways too. But the next step is now we have to prioritize, right? Now we talked a little bit about prioritization, about maybe thinking about what's important to us in our learning or whatever. And in this particular case, Kelly was talking about new business development, service organization, that type of thing. And some of you may already know this one, but I just want to draw it out for you in case you don't. This is a prioritization matrix. And so what you have here is you have high and low, and across the bottom, you have effort. How long is this going to take you? And going on the Y axis is impact. And I like to divide this, if put simply, into 4 different quadrants. And then with each one of these quadrants, they can also have varying degrees of success or what it is we want to accomplish. And so when we think about something being a very high effort with very little impact, this is something that we absolutely want to say no to. We're just not going to have time. I mean, it's going to be the last thing we do. Now, if it's really important, then maybe that means that it's going to have more impact. Maybe it lives closer into this area. So if we have something that might be actually, I'm going to actually do the no. I'm going to do this in red. So we're just like, we're not even going to go there, right? And then if we get to the point where we say, okay, what if it's low impact, low effort, but it absolutely has to be done? Well, then this is more about it being what I like to call low-hanging fruit, right? And so sometimes what I will do is I'll draw either in gray or very light colors in the background a tree. And then once the client comes to me and says, okay, these are some of the things we want to do. Sometimes I write it out. Sometimes it's on little sticky notes, right? And so these are low hanging fruit. And the reason why I like to put them on sticky notes is then I can tell them, I can go through all these sticky notes, especially if they, if we have like a sticky note just blows up, right? An explosion here, and they all put them on here. We can go through each one and say, okay, is that high impact, low impact in terms of our effort? And within this own quadrant, and is this going to be higher effort or lower effort? And so again, what happens is that high impact, low effort, we're going to really love doing the things that are up in this upper left-hand corner. These are the things that we're really going to probably prioritize just within this own quadrant. And maybe the ones down here, maybe some of these things actually are fruit that just fall to the ground, and maybe someone else does them, right? And then when we think about, okay, what's going to give us high impact? These are the things that we're like, no kidding, we need to focus all of our attention. This is what we're going to do right now. These are the things that need to happen right away. But we might also find that there are some things that for the really, really big wins, yes, this is going to be big impact, but it's also going to take a great amount of effort. There are going to be seeds that we need to plant here that get us there, right? Let me get rid of this other thing that's in the background. That seems like it's both backgrounds are pretty busy. But the idea is that, again, we can easily ask the client to help us, or they help themselves, come up with, no kidding, how do we prioritize these things? And being able to put them in these quadrants can really help. Now, this big effort but high impact, a lot of people like to call this that these are going to be the play-by-plays, right? Or these are the things that we're sort of kicking down the field. If you think about a sports analogy, whereas the high impact, and I wouldn't say that it's less effort, but if just the one-time Hail Marys don't always work, what are the things that are going to take time? We need to be able to plant seeds in order to get here. These are things like succession planning, or things that are going to take years or decades to do. Whereas this high impact, low effort, they might put a time constraint to, this might be months, whereas this might be years, right? And down here, again, these are more like tasks. And so again, a really quick way. Let's see. Yeah, Deborah is saying, maybe you're saying that these are stretch goals, right? Taking you a little bit further. Would anybody else add to this? Have you used this before? Some of you may have. Some of you, this might be new. And I also have a visual that I will send you. It's a digital visual that you can, a template that you can actually draw on top of that have all of these things as well. Yeah.
I would just say that it's an incredible tool when people feel so overwhelmed with all the things they want to do. And
Yeah.
I bring this into play and people just have a sigh of relief, you know, and they're like,
whew.
okay. Okay. I got it. Oh, could you bring that back up, Deborah? Can you bring it back up? But I love the visual that I could actually, you know, bring it to life, like you were saying. So thank you.
Yeah. So imagine if these visuals were only quadrants, this is still this is still helpful, but there's no feeling in there, is there? I mean, it's still pretty static. It might as well just be a spreadsheet or something. No offense, spreadsheet lovers. But the idea here is that this is just a blank page where it's like this. I know that's not what we want. In fact, you might even fill the whole thing with one of these big symbols so that nothing goes there, right? Or you actually put something in there and you say, you know what? We're not going to do it. We're just not going to do it. We know that this needs to get done. We're not going to do it. We're going to let it go. And that might help people. I mean, you might have to go through a process of like grieving something that you thought needed to be done, but you're just going to say, you know, we're going to learn that. Great. So Matt is calling it the Eisenhower matrix. Okay. I just thought it was a prioritization matrix. Thank you so much for giving it credit. Yeah, and then by having some of these other things, low-hanging fruit, people can imagine that, but as soon as you draw that picture, it's like that's where that goes. They can easily assign it and let it go. Then they can start to say, okay, where do we need to put most of our energy here? And it does. It takes those things that are abstract and making them more concrete. And talking about even more concrete, I said before, people are like popcorn and they all pop at different levels. There's some folks that still want to keep talking, still want to keep dreaming. And then there are others that are ready to literally roll up their sleeves and get to it. So when it comes to these things that we've got to do, whether it's tasks we've got to do right away or things that we need to start planning out, the next chart that you can have up, and this can be done as a flip chart, it can be done on a wall chart, whatever you need. It can even be done on a digitally so that you have it already as a digital working file. So it doesn't have to be markers on paper at all, but if that's all you have, that's fine. And it's very simply who is going to do what and when. And the when can be, when are you going to start? Or when does it need to be done by? So the starting helps people get motivated. When you say done by, it's really a deadline. Or is there something, especially if it's one of these things that's going to take us longer, is there a timeline that we need to be able to build that in, right? And so what I like to say is, okay, so we've identified the what. It could, again, be a task. Or it could be, so let's just call it a task for now, and we might put someone's name in it. So as a facilitator, I'm saying, okay, this needs to be done. And then we'll say, okay, who's willing to do that? Can I see any hands? And we've got a hand. And you say, okay, so-and-so, I understand you're going to be doing the what. Do you need help? Or is this something you can do by yourself? And if they say, no, I definitely need help, I'll put a +1 under it. And then I'll say, who's willing to work with so-and-so? So now here's where we get into some group dynamics where people are like, oh, I want to help. And they are either saying they want to help because of what it is, and or they want to help because of who it is, right? So now you say, okay, again, ask them, is it just going to be you two? Do you need any more help? And I frame it, do you need any more help? Because if you say, if anybody else wants to help, you get the do-gooder, happy people that just want to help. But it's like, hey, we haven't even identified all the tasks yet. So if you find that you've got like 6 people want to help with this one thing, say, okay, can we identify some more tasks first? Great. Okay, now we're starting to see that we actually have a lot more than what all of us can do. So let's go ahead and identify these tasks. But getting that first one done kind of gets the ball rolling. If you put all of these tasks out first, you get people in too much of a thinky phase. And then they're like, oh my gosh, no way. Hey, remember so-and-so? They were so brave. Who wants to identify, who wants to volunteer or work on this next task? And then ask them, no kidding. And, you know, say, let's just throw out a yard dart. If they don't feel comfortable saying, you know, if they say, okay, I'm going to start next week, but I don't know when it's going to be done, that's fine. And then once you start getting through these tasks, determine, is one task dependent on another? That is going to affect when something gets started or when it needs to get done by, right? So are there any dependencies here? And I know that I'm talking to a lot of facilitators in the room, so this might be for more of the visual folks that may not know how the facilitation process works. But since I do have a lot of facilitators in the room, what else would you add to this particular one to make sure that it's efficient and that it actually works, that people can keep to it accountability wise? Yeah, Deborah.
I have another column.
Yes.
Actually, says resources.
Exactly. Okay. So this is starting to get into a whole nother graphic. Can I share another graphic with you then?
Can I finish the
Yeah.
idea?
Yes.
Just in regards to every single task, I have them identify what do we already have.
Good.
Will help you complete this task.
That's wonderful.
When we add that extra step into the task, it helps have less of a burden. It also helps people figure out whether there's dependencies or, oh, we already have this rolling. Then all of a sudden somebody like signs up for it. We can get that done fast. So it's about practicing the principle of what do we already have that we can build on. We're not doing this from scratch. So
love it. Yes. Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else you would add? That certainly makes it more efficient. Yes.
Yeah, maybe, well, I try to use them, you know, like a macro structure. Maybe it's not a column per se, but when you structure tasks, you start to use 3 phases, you know, divide the list of tasks in 3 phases. So for instance, the first phase should be, I don't know, design. The second one should be, you know, realization or effectuation. And the final one could be, final phase should be, I don't know, debrief, you know? So it's like when you have all sorts of tasks, you know, it tends to be a bit confusing, but when you, and I like a lot the idea of Aristotle regarding plays, you know, theatrical plays, that structuring the whole group of things into a structure of 3 that makes sense. They may interlap or not, but the structure itself, the meta structure helps, you know, to give some sort of coherence to what you do and some sort of flow.
Absolutely. And so usually when I use the who, what, when, and I agree with you that needs to happen. I almost feel like, and that's why I was almost pushing Deborah a little bit, and that is this resources actually is relevant to probably more of this information here, but we could go even deeper into this too if we needed to. Like, well, what if we don't have the resources? Then what do we do? You know, maybe we need to table something. But usually what happens is I go through this piece, and then I go through the prioritization, and that usually takes up enough time in a meeting, right? And so I do that who, what, when to kind of jumpstart this. This can then turn into a spreadsheet or some kind of way to track, you know, the success of this or what people are working on. And as soon as you said, you know, okay, now we've got different phases, I think that's excellent. So we can decide how many phases we want. And what you identified was design. You said realization and debrief. And what is that?
It depends. Yeah, it depends. Maybe so yeah, when I facilitate, for instance, I have a first phase where I pre-design or a structure, and then the coordination phase, and maybe the third phase should be, you know, doing the workshop itself and debriefing. So it may take many forms. It depends whether it's a workshop, a course, or whatever.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Well, and this could,
Exactly.
I really love this visual. I just love this visual because, you can just, like you're saying, after you get all the stuff, it's like, visually, like plotting it out so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Right.
Right.
So, like, even if it's like 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months,
Right.
even like that could be super helpful.
Exactly. In time. So we can say these things. A lot of things are also put by the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan, right? And you can start to list out some of the resources here in each one of these. So now we can even divvy up what are the resources needed for each of these, right? You might even identify, now I'm getting a little silly, but you can imagine that this is sort of a, you can also draw construction cones or whatever, but now we've got these hurdles or barriers that we might have to come up against. And so what are some of those hurdles or barriers that are going to happen that we need to be aware of?
Yes, I'm just going to say yes, and thank you for putting that, because when I've been doing, I've forgotten to alert people of the hurdles that are coming ahead and have them ready for it. So thank you. Just sharing.
And also, again, and it's not that when we're doing appreciative inquiry, we want to ignore the barriers. We want to be obvious of those barriers, but what strengths do we have in order, going back to that resilience, going back to what we already have in terms of our strengths and skill sets? What do we have to get past these barriers? What do we have that's going to help motivate us going forward? And so identifying what these strengths are when these barriers come up, say, okay, we know that's going to happen. Again, what are our needs? And what are our strengths that we have in order to get us through that part, right? Great. So this is starting to look a little bit like the Grove Consultants graphic game plan, if any of you know that. I threw the barriers in there. I think they have mountains or something like that. But we can use these same kind of ideas, coming up with your own types of visuals to be able to come up with these. And it might also be that in the process here, if you wanted to make this into a working document, you can either say, okay, what great ideas came out of this process, or what were some insights, learnings. And a lot of times I just use these 3 little, I almost call them sparkle marks, right? Insights, learnings, and ahas that come out of this, lessons learned, but that are positive. And that, again, can reinforce those strengths as well. Good. Great. So I may have missed some of your things that you typed in the chat here. I apologize. Matt, you're saying, I like to encourage referring to people's needs to distinguish from resource needs, which are inanimate. That is excellent. So again, and we do this in the Grove, but we identify who are the teams, who are the people that are going to be working on this. And it might be their needs, it might be their skills, right? So you might say, that's what's here. Maybe the resources or the needs that are down here, maybe that's overall, but then what do the people bring with them? And then what do we either need to build or buy for, right? So people can be a resource, but there can be other kinds of resourcing as well. Now, Deborah and Antonio, you both said decluttering. What was that about?
No, that the whole idea of listing the tasks and then putting them up in phases helps decluttering, because we sometimes when we tend to micromanage, right? And this helps to bring coherence, not only to unveil or open all the kernel of stuff we have to do, but we also need to bring some sort of time constraints, but also bring coherence, and that's what the phasing aspect helps to.
Yeah, Absolutely. Another piece that comes into this, and again, if you can all, actually, let's try to use the to everyone. Whenever I see a private one, I'm like, is that just for me, or do I need to, but there was a question there about asking if there's a commitment partner needed on how to encourage when there are storms. So this is excellent. If you might have everyone you need in your who, what, when. It might be there. And you might even say, can we have a commitment partner, someone who's going to be committed to this? I love that language. But there's another piece that we haven't talked about yet, and that some of you may have used before, and that's a RACI chart. Does everyone know what a RACI chart is, or would you like me to go over that? Okay, so I saw a few nods that maybe you wanted to see it. So a RACI chart is who is responsible for this particular task, who is accountable. And so what's the difference between those two things? Your boss might be the one that is accountable for it. Well, I would say no. Your boss might be the one that's responsible for a task happening, maybe to show their boss, but the person that they need to hold accountable to get the actual task done might be a totally different person. Who needs to be consulted? Meaning, who do we need to ask to get the right information to make sure we're doing this correctly? Who might be a good person that could advise us? And then I is who needs to be informed. So this person may not have anything to do with what we're doing, but we need to let them know we're doing it. That way they don't take resources away from us. That way, it's just someone who may not be in the room, but they need to know that we're doing this. It's important. And so you might divvy it up this way. It might be, here's the task. And then you've got a matrix. And again, this can be visual in front of the room, or it can be done as a spreadsheet. But again, it's just organizing the information. And then once you have all of these tasks, you might start to put the people and their names in those. And it might not be that every task has all of those. There might just be one. There might be two. But what that does is it helps everybody see, again, that all of those thoughts that are stuck in your head now get down on paper, and everyone can see who is doing what. Right? Okay, so Frederico, yes, too many visuals become a little confusing to you, and you love the simplicity. Yeah, and so reading the room and understanding what the group needs in order for that next part. So let's talk a little bit about that next part. And I have someone messaged me during the break. And so I'll just read it out to you. One scenario could be working with a group to check in on them. They seem to be just okay since becoming a team, but the synergy does not seem to be there. And I want to figure out what the issues are and what to discuss. The time frame for the facilitation is 2 hours. Now, 2 hours can be a very long time to talk about what's up, right? So what I like to do with each session that I'm in is at least have a little bit of time. And this is when I'm saying facilitated sessions, maybe not trainings like this, but facilitated sessions. I want to put in time at the very beginning to do what what I like to call is unpack people's backpack, right? So let's just review our agreements today. Okay, let's review those agreements. And I do that first off. And some of you had said that too, that's one of the first things you do is it comes from the group. That gives you a tone of where people are at, right? So they're going to tell you, I want to be heard. I want to make sure that we get through this, and this today. I want to make sure that we keep the pace going, whatever they agree on. It's totally up to them. Sometimes you can also tell, are people being just nice or just by saying the agreements, or is there something that they truly want? Now, if they start to get into what they want to accomplish, then say, great. So this was the purpose of this meeting, and just check with them. Is it still the purpose? Okay. And oh, by the way, here's the agenda. But I heard someone say that they wanted to do something else today. Do we have room for that? Is that a priority? So that sometimes is a great way to get those kinds of conversations started. And if you're still feeling that tension that's coming up in the room, there's a couple of things that I like to do that helps them see where they are and maybe possibly get some things out. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you, I think many of you may already know this, and it's the and actually you could probably add to this because I know that there's different versions, but the fact that every group goes through that process of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And I've even seen this model, and if someone wants to give credit to it, please do, where it goes in a circle. But the idea is if your group just formed and you're starting to feel like something's up, it's totally natural that they're going to start storming. They're in that process of trying to figure out who's doing what's going on. How do we help them? Because they are going to get to that norming phase. It's just the natural progression of that so that they can get to that performing phase. And this is a wonderful opportunity, especially when it comes to visioning and using visuals, that if they're in that phase, you can really kind of assess what do you need from them right now? Are they like, okay, it's just kind of icky and we need to start looking at what our true goal is here? Do we need to create a shared vision? That shared vision can take many different forms, and there's lots of different ways to create visual visions for groups. And if you have something specific, please let me know and we can jump into one of those. Or do they, no kidding, need to work on some things? And so, meaning work some things out. Did something already bad happen or traumatic happen, and we need to have a conversation about it? Something that I've seen was really effective was something called Speak Through Me. Have any of you heard of that? So what it is these two people have an issue with each other, but instead of them going at each other in a meeting and us all watching that fall apart, you say, okay, so-and-so, I noticed that, that you've said a few times this and this. Do you have more to say about that? Speak through me. Speak to me as if you're talking to the situation or the person. Don't use any names. Just say how you're feeling, what you would like to see differently. Just start talking, and they will just speak to you. And as a facilitator, you need to know how to resource that kind of energy so that you don't collect it, but you do this speak through me. Now, when I did this with a facilitator, I was the co-facilitator at the time doing graphics. What I wrote down, and I had two parts to this, and I'm going to put this on a piece of paper so you can see it. There was the facilitator doing the speak through me, and I had started just on the first half here is I started writing down all of the feelings, all of the things that were coming up with people. So this was like, and this could be negative. It's fine. And then whenever someone would say something positive that was a feeling, I would put it above the line. And there's no judgment here, just giving it a place to live. Okay. And then after we did that for a while, we're saying, okay, what do we need to do? What actual, no kidding, steps do we need to take? And you can do this a number of ways. You can either talk about that we want to get to our goal. So this little, you can do sort of sparkle marks like a sun, or if you want to say, okay, we've got a target here, you can certainly use the visual of a target. What steps do we need to take in order to get to our goal, or that we want to feel better? So literally a visceral shift in our feeling, in our energy. And being able to do that, we got all of those things out. And what I've learned is that if you write down what someone said, no attribution, do not write down their name. Gary said that he was mad about this. Just write down what those feelings were or what those issues were. And then once they see it written down, they don't have to say it 10 more times because they don't feel heard. They have it written down. Now, where can we take it to that next level? That to me is a pretty extreme situation. I think that's something that might be a little, I think you as a facilitator need to know, is that something you feel comfortable doing? And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then another way to another way to approach, say, you can go back to your appreciative agreements and say, you know, we made this agreement that we're not going to do this. So how do we empower ourselves so that we don't go there? There's that. But then there's another thing. There's another really wonderful graphic. And if you haven't heard of this, I will also put this in your resources. It's a book called The Primes. And this is written by Chris McGough. And it's wonderful because you can go on his website and he'll have like a 2 or 3 minute video, maybe 5-minute video for each one of the different primes. And the primes, he says, can solve any problem in any organization. And what he's done here is drawn a very simple line. And if you want, you can go back in and you can label it if you want to, norms. But the idea is that what kind of behaviors are okay, acceptable, and above the line, and what kind of behaviors are, no kidding, not acceptable and below the line. And so you can work through, a team can work through some of their issues by not putting what people did and saying, so-and-so does this, that's not okay. You can say, this is not okay to me, right? Have them put them in that type of language. Yeah. All right, we got some great stuff in the chat here. Yeah, Matt, I love what you're saying. He likes to remind teams with seasoned professionals that no amount of professional expertise circumvents the dynamics of team development. That's absolutely right. We are very dynamic people, and we're all here to do the work, and we've got to figure out how to do that together. Melissa's saying the sustainability garden would be another great solution in situations like this, in addition to the speak through me. Also, name it, flip it, frame it is another great way to help steer conversations in a more constructive path. Melissa, do you want to say more about that? Do you mind saying more about the flip it, name it, flip it, frame it for those who may not be certified certified facilitators?
And I'm also really glad to be in the room with Kelly and Sue, because they're also conversations worth having trainers. But basically what it is, it's by Sherry Torres and Jackie Stavros. And so it's any situation, because it's very easy to get stuck in the negative. That's kind of what we're primed to do. So kind of what Heather was talking about is, you know, in order to feel seen, just name it. What is the problem?
I'm going to add you as a spotlight. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
So you name it. What is the problem, right? And then when we're talking about flipping it, what is the ideal? Not even just the positive opposite, but what is the ideal situation, experience that you're hoping to reach? And then you're going to frame it. So you're going to be asking questions about some generative questions that will help you or help the conversation get to that ideal state. So the whole name it, flip it, frame it. And then Sue, Kelly, did you want to add to that?
I was going to say, I usually share that if you waved your magic wand, what's the best thing that could happen? And so that's another way to frame that idea, and then asking those generative questions to really help them think differently and out of the box. So exactly what Melissa said.
Yeah.
Echoing
Excellent.
on Melissa and Sue
Thank
too.
you,
And
Sue.
one question that I always add to it is, once we talk about, you know, what is that ideal and what does that look like? You know, we want to paint a vivid picture of what that might look like. I also ask people, how good could it get? Just to take a moment and reflect on this. How good could this get? And let them just offer up what comes to mind for them.
I love that. I love that. And so now we're getting back into the dream. Yeah. What's possible? Yes. Now we're getting back into that dream phase a little bit, right? So maybe a team put together this design, but when you're actually in the process of working through that with folks, say, you know what, maybe we need to go back to our dream phase. Maybe we need to figure out our why. What's that core thing that we're doing here together, right? Revisiting that. Excellent. Thank you so much, all three of you, for adding to that. And then, so Antonio, put them all, Heather, what was that? Just all the different resources? I'm going to certainly do that. Or did you have something specific?
No, the models you were sharing, put them all. I was trying to say put them all because, and I just wanted to highlight something that Federico said a while ago, that he was a bit confused because there were a lot of visuals. We started with one, and then we diverged into many. And yeah, just to add to that, and I think that's a valuable and important thing to say, because yeah, simplicity and synthesis is important. And from what I understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the idea is to have all these tools, but they're not, to be used as law, but depending on the context, you can see which one fits better, and that also relates to your own experience and how you flow with the group and what emerges. I think I've been recently detaching from the idea of being such a structured and squared up facilitator and being more flowing with others. And that's why it's important to understand all the tools, because if you have less tools, you have less opportunities or less little perspectives to share or to use. So I think that has also to do with your skill. Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And just going back to what Federico said earlier is that, yeah, it doesn't have to be this structured thing, but it does need to be purposeful and mindful. And like you said, a paradigm. And in the first session, I talked about how all meetings have a start and an ending, where we come in and we're diverging, and we need to come up with some of those criterias, like the funnel, to figure out what is going to pass through, and how do we come together to some kind of a consensus to ship something. And I just put these brackets here because that's essentially just a framework. And that's what appreciative inquiry is a framework. In each one of these visuals, you don't have to have 10 visuals in the meeting. Yes, Federico, I came out and threw a whole bunch of them down. I threw a whole bunch of them down that I didn't even expect to talk about today, right? As needs come up, the more of these pieces that you have in your toolbox, the better. That's why we have the Padlet. So hopefully some of you, if you have things like these that you're using them, you're welcome to scrub them if you want, but please, if it's something you feel and are willing to share, this is a lot. This can be a lot. But just to paint a little bit of a picture as a graphic facilitator, a lot of times, once I have that agenda, and I know what that agenda is going to be, I will create a visual for each element in that agenda. And it's as simple as having a purpose statement, or having that sustainability garden. And you were asking, Antonio, about the sustainability garden. I have one that's in the Padlet with just a very brief explanation. Melissa, if you have any resources, or if anybody else has resources around the sustainability garden, please feel free to share. It's essentially a parking lot, but it can be used in many other different ways as well, depending on how you queued that up. But as a graphic recorder or graphic facilitator, if it's a day-long event, I may have anywhere from 4 to 8, depending on how quickly they run through and how aggressive the meeting is, different visuals. And these visuals could be large. They could be a meter tall, or they could be 4 by 8 feet. And some of them can be as simple as a flip chart. And we're going to get into that more in the next session of Delivery Destiny, where I talk about all the tools, whether you're in person or working digitally like this, how do we deliver those different types of charts? So this is really about design and ideation. Excellent. How do I use the diverge converge funnel in sequence, or do you use one or the other depending on the scenario? I may need you to unmute and say more about that. Are you saying how would I use this? The diverge, converge, and the funnel.
Yeah, like these two graphics. Because you kind of mentioned that you're like, oh, I start with this one and then I move to the impact matrix. And I was just kind of wondering how with you, do you typically use these in tandem, or are you using one or the other?
Right. So I would say that, again, it all depends on what the group is needing, but this whole diverge converge, this is really the framework in which most meetings happen, right?
Gotcha.
So the diverge part is really the top part of that funnel. The criteria then becomes, this decision-making piece, and then where things start to come together, that can then be followed up using the, using the prioritization matrix and the who, what, when. And that is just an example, literally an example. Like these 3 things can be done in a meeting if that's what's needed. But again, knowing that desired outcome of what is needed for that meeting, then you can start to put all of the visual templates together to be able to meet that need. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah. So having that strong desired outcome. And again, this particular funnel, this can happen in the dream state, as we talked about here, when you're trying to get people, when you're in the discovery meeting, you're trying to distill down what it is they want to accomplish, or you can use that in the design phase, in the agenda, to be able to pull out those activities within the session. Yeah. What other questions do you have? Because we're almost out of time, and I just had a few other things that I wanted to cover. We're not diving back into anything. We're just wrapping up now, but just wanted to check in and see what other questions do you have? Considering your high bar and low bar in the last session, or your own expectations that we talked about today using the Alive model, what questions do you need to ask for clarification? Because we only have one session left. Feel free to unmute or type it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what do you do if you make a mistake, like a huge typo, because you can't spell, you're dyslexic or something like that? And so do you just scrap and be like, sorry, you guys, we got to start from the beginning?
No way. Oh my gosh. Are you talking about when you're using markers on paper in front of people?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because on a typewriter or on your computer, you can just delete. If you're on the whiteboard, you can just use the back of your hand and erase it, right? But when you're in front of folks and you're working on a flip chart, if you are working so fast, sometimes I just scribble it out. But if I'm making a piece that I want it to be presentable, I just use label paper. So labels, like address labels, are a perfect size, and some of them might be bigger or smaller. I can show you a couple of products that I use in the delivery state, because I consider this part of delivery, but absolutely. So just take a white label and put it right over it. Now, you want to make sure you're using, it's pretty much just the cheap return address or address labels that they have at the office supply store, because that's almost a little bit about the size that you're going to be writing. If you're writing small, you may need 2 or more. If you're writing a little bit bigger, some people use the full sheets and then just cut out the shape or the size that they need. I don't have time to sit there with scissors and cut things out. The labels just come right off, and I'll post a few of them and put right over it. Yep. That's the secret. And it's funny, if people don't know that and they've never seen you work, they freak out. They're like, wait a minute, you just wrote a word and now it's gone. And you can write right over the paper. If you get the expensive kind that are like security proof or whatever, if you do that and then take a photograph using a flash, this is just a pro tip, and take a flash, it actually reflects back to you and you have a black box. So you can't see what was written. So get the cheapest, easiest types of labels. Yeah. Antonio, you have a question or something to add?
No, yeah. I don't know if this was stated before, but I just had an idea of how this framework, this big framework, could be applied. And I don't know if it's possible, but I just posed the question that maybe going through, at least partially, through a complete example from your own experience, going through that complete with a specific line without going into the further details, but maybe going through the complete 3-part, would help also to see some aspects of choosing the right tools, and I don't know if it's possible, if it goes beyond the extension of time, but just seeing an example from a client would help a lot to see the flow of the 3 phases, on the tools that you used, I don't know, for me, it would help to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that all depends. So are you talking about, just want to double check and then we can get to Deborah, and I'm happy to stay on for those of you that need to drop off. Let me do this. Are you talking about this, first of all, Antonio, or different phases?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think I meant the whole AI process and
right.
Yeah, and giving
this part.
Yeah,
absolutely.
with a specific example from a client and saying, hey, I had this client and we did this, and this. I don't know, to just help the flow of things. I know it goes beyond to go further into detail, but if it's possible, it will be great.
Yeah, so let me do this. I'm actually going to give you access to a 14-page case study of where I use a lot of appreciative inquiry things. It doesn't actually go through those phases. And I think that's really interesting because I laid out this curriculum in the phase. I work in these phases, and I can talk a little bit more to that. I think that this particular visual speaks to that mostly. But as far as actually assigning things to it, sometimes when we're in a session, we're popping around. We're popping around doing all the different phases. But I do want to make some time afterwards. I'm happy to, let me just check my schedule, make sure I don't have another appointment, but I'm happy to stay on for, yes, I can stay on for another 10 minutes after we close, but just want to double check that we have met the payoff today. And as I'm taught, and as I'm saying this, I'm realizing, shouldn't this class be like 6 sessions or something? But also know that if I made it 6 sessions, some of you wouldn't come because you'd be like, that's too many sessions. That's too much money or whatever. So can you walk away today with more visual templates and inspiration to customize to your own needs for your clients? If anybody is a no, let me know, and and then we can talk. We can answer some more questions afterwards. And just want to remind everyone that I have open office hours on Monday. It's the same time that we meet here, and then next week we're going to go over the deliver session. Okay, so hopefully we met those highs and lows. If not, your high bar and low bar. If not, please stay on and I will answer your questions. And keep in mind that there's one more session left. Keep watching your email. I will send you a link to this recording if you want to see it and give you pre-work. It's pretty much just a checklist for the deliver session. And I'd love to leave with a 1-word checkout. So I would love to, and then Antonio and Deborah, we can come back and answer your questions, but I'm just going to go right down the list here. If everybody can unmute, and then when I call your name, if you can just give me 1 word of how you're feeling as you leave today's session. Okay. So Angela.
Hi, feeling inspired.
Good.
Thank
Good to
you.
hear. Cheryl.
I'm going to say feeling full. It's a lot of great information.
Lots of information. Thank you. Kelly.
Empowered.
Thank you. Frederico.
Oh, on mute.
Yep, you're muted. Frederico, 1 word.
Challenge.
Challenged. Okay. Matt.
Saturated.
Melissa. Thank you.
All right, I love Matt's response. Reflective.
Thank you. Rachel.
Motivated.
Motivated. Are you sure? I'm
I
just teasing you.
promise.
Okay. Sue.
Excited.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Who did I miss? Deborah.
No problem. All of that, excited, motivated, and ready to go.
Excellent. And Deborah. I'm sorry, you are Deborah. Antonio. Sorry, I'm looking at my list, not thinking.
Yeah, curious.
Good, good. So those were mainly positive. Some of them were a little full. If you need to drop off, I completely understand. I'll keep this recording going and I'll answer any questions that you have for the next 10 minutes. Thank you so much, Melissa, for putting information in about the sustainability garden. That's excellent. And then also I will include the case study in the Google Documents. It'll be there after I send you, I will put all of that together and send you all an email with all of that information because I want to get you as many resources as possible. Now, to answer the first one of the questions, is there a specific way that I use appreciative inquiry through all of those phases? Yes, I'm sharing those with you, but I'm also playing jazz as I'm facilitating, taking what I need in order to meet those clients' desired outcomes. So if I were to narrow this down, and thank you for those of you that need to drop off, if I had to narrow this down, I go through each of those phases, right? So let me just review that again. And yes, there are visuals that live within each of these phases, but I essentially go through all of these phases. It's what helped me have some kind of sanity when I was working in Washington, D.C. and starting out as a facilitator. I learn about I gather the information, gather those requirements, about the client and what we're about to do. I have a discovery meeting with them. I figure out what their dream is. I'm really trying to get to those desired outcomes. Some of these visuals can be used in the design phase, but those design phase is really about, and I'm learning all of this part is all, I'm getting all of this information in that discovery meeting, the logistics. I'm coming up with my visual templates and how those are coming up. I'm thinking about, and actually after I leave the discovery meeting, I'll start thinking about how are we going to split up people to learn to manage that energy and how would those visual templates be used. And that deliver phase, which I'm going to cover next week, I'm really going to be talking about the different formats, but I'm also going to be talking about next steps and what do we do to ensure that we are either celebrating or in fact verifying that we have met the desired outcomes. So that's really the key to so much of this is designing and delivering to meet those desired outcomes. And those visuals live within that, depending again, within those desired outcomes. So hopefully that helped. But Deborah, you had a question.
Yes, so the technical question about when you were, not on this, you can get rid of that one, but when you were typing on, when you were actually, it felt like you were typing on some forms as we were talking. It seemed like you were typing. And
I was writing. You're talking about these forms here? Let me see. Is it that?
I think you are correct. It looked as if you were typing, and I was wondering what magic was happening because it was different than, like it seemed like it was coming in. It was the, when you were writing on that. So I just like the technical part of it is how can I get that and how does that work?
This is delivery. You're all so keen. You're all so keen. I'm going to be definitely talking about this next week. This is an iPad. We put so I'm going to be talking about how do we take all these great templates and when do we use them and what technology do we use, right? So I've given you a PowerPoint of the whole 5D and 4D cycle. You can use that however you want. And that's just typing. But when it comes to an iPad, I will cover this next week on what's equipment and then some real pro tips on how to make sure that's efficient. Literally, how do you make that replace the video? All of that.
So just I tried to downloaded the forms that we're supposed to be able to edit, and I don't have edit access. So I did so all of those forms that you have sent to us, like that says customize, and here's you can
PDFs. The PDF.
Yeah, all of the stuff that you sent us is not, if you could give me permission, or probably other people are going to have the same problem.
Right. So they're really pretty much just a handout that you can print and write. But if you want to be able to type in them, I can make those fillable forms. Yeah.
Yeah, I do everything virtually. So printing just is just not.
That's fine.
That would be awesome.
I'm totally down with that. I love that feedback. Yep. I'll make all of the handouts. Those are pretty much pre-work kind of things.
Right, because you say that they're customizable, but I can't edit them. So they're not really, I'd have to redo them. So I would love it. No, I would love it.
I will do that. I love that. I love making improvements. People are also wanting that as well. Let's see. Melissa's saying the 3Ds are just the process of AI. I know many graphics that illustrate this methodology shows it as a linear process, but it isn't. You go to where the client needs. That's right. This may require us revisiting previous phases of the process. That's right. Each of us, which you can easily incorporate images into the process. That's right. And so what this really is about is figuring out, once you know, as a facilitator, learning the appreciative inquiry process. If you want to become a certified facilitator in appreciative inquiry, I highly recommend attending the appreciative inquiry facilitator training that's put on. And also Jeannie and Joan teach a certified class in appreciative resilience. There are a few visual models and appreciative inquiry. If you take the training, there are not only visual models, but there are some visuals. There's a tree metaphor, and there's some other visuals that can certainly be used. This is where I live as a visual practitioner, and appreciative inquiry is a big piece. So I'm putting these two together. So no matter where you're coming from, you can add a little bit of that. You want to get certified in any of these things, you certainly can. So hopefully that helps. Yeah. Any other questions while we're still here? A few more minutes.
I think just coming back, I want to talk about what Federico was talking about earlier. And what I love about the AI model is it's so versatile. So I think in terms of how you want to use it, and you know, you have the 5Ds, but people have modified it to the 5 Is because, you know, words create worlds. And so oftentimes in corporations, they don't like to dream. They want to innovate. And so I think you being in the driver's seat, you really can tailor the process and the principles to how it works best for you, how it works best for your client. So the sky's the limit. So I would think of it not so much as restrictions, but exploring what's possible and what works best for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, Melissa. And again, if anyone wants to attend the office hours, or if you want to schedule a one-to-one to me, I do offer that as coaching. I'm happy to take, if you have an agenda or a desired outcome, and show you what visuals would I put in that. So approach design, this is my specialty. I can take any consultant or any facilitator gives me an agenda and I say, here are the visuals to support, because I know what those desired outcomes are for the whole meeting. And then if I ask them, what are you trying to do in this particular exercise? Here's what we need to harvest, right? Does the end product need to look pretty, or does it need to look like we did some no kidding work and we have to have deep conversations? The questions need to be able to match that, and the visuals need to be able to support that. So I'm going to talk more, and I'm going to give you lots of examples, some case studies and things like that for the next session, for you to be able to see how I've used all of these visuals in lots of different types of scenarios. Some of them have a lot of narration with them. Some of them I'm just going to show you on screen next time to show and tell a story about how we got to this visual. Some of them are messy, some of them are gorgeous. So very good. Any other questions? Deborah, do you still have your hand up? New question?
I do. I don't mean to, but I I would say that my mind is just like all over the, like, with possibilities. I do a lot of well, I do all online facilitation. I teach courses, and I also facilitate AI. And I just have like stuff I've made up. Do you help people make it prettier? Do you help people?
If I can't help you, or if I don't have time, I can certainly send you to someone. So I teach lettering specifically to visual practitioners, and have done so for many years. So I know thousands of visual practitioners around the world that I can help, that I can put you in touch with if you need. Yeah.
You're
happy
just
to
very
do so.
inspiring. I'm just trying to figure out, how do I, like, you know, like, get it better. So
yeah,
thank
well,
you.
and you know, I will say this, and if you need to drop off, it's fine. I always say that we know where we want to be, and here's our ability, and where we want to be is just beyond our fingertips. So that inspiration you're feeling, that wanting to know more feeling, it just goes like this the rest of our lives as lifelong learners. And drawing and learning how to do this is no different. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great week.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you. Federico, did you have something to add?
Yes, along with what Deborah just said, is as you know, I have already repeated this several times. So for me, the point is, I want your help to visualize my essays. That's the point for me. How to visualize the Word documents that that's the issue, because I can see that just seeing what you are doing, I can see that just writing paragraphs, sentences in 20 pages is not the best way to communicate content.
Sure.
I'm becoming very, very, very convinced about that. So how to enhance the writing of essays with these visual aids, for me, will be what I am just looking forward. So that's my request.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because there are many different visuals for many different purposes. And when you say essays, I would need to know a little bit more about that. But I want to know first, are there frameworks or models or tools within what you're talking about? Those can all be visualized. Are there stories that need to be narrated? Those can turn into storyboards. There are so many, and I'm just going to make a note of myself for the next session to bring, there is an, the, and tell me I'm missing words now, but the elemental table, the periodic table of elements, there is one of those for visuals.
No, I don't have any. I'm just starting.
Okay, but what I'm telling
more-
you is that there is a resource that's like the periodic table that has all of the elements on the earth, right? So aluminum and
Okay.
gases, and metals and all of that. There is one that is for visuals, and I will put that in the resources because that will blow your mind. Federico,
Okay.
you will be able to look at
Thank
that
you.
and go, I have an essay and I need that kind of visual to be part of that essay. I need that. And you can either look at that and say, maybe you need to just work with an illustrator, but maybe you need to work with someone who understands
what I need.
visuals,
That's what
communication
I need. That's
visuals.
what I need.
There's lots of different illustrators. There's those that illustrate children's books, and there's those who illustrate concepts. So yeah.
Exactly. Me
Yes.
is the one that illustrate concepts.
Yes,
So
yes.
if we have a minute, I don't know about Mary, but if this is okay. But the whole thing is that when you ask if we have something to share with you or with the group in terms of publications. So going back to the comment that I made at the beginning in terms of the appreciative paradigm, I have this 21 pages article essay that is being reviewed for publication. So do you want to, you say you want to have it, I can share that with you as maybe for the time being as private.
No, I'm just saying if you have already something you're willing to share, just share it. That's it. I'm just saying that if it's something you want other people to read and see and and it's in a place where you can share it. That's all.
I should wait.
Okay,
I think
that's fine.
at least it's published. That's what I want to say last, because I was thinking about should I or should I not.
Yes,
So,
no, that's when you're ready. I just think that the way that you spoke about it had high value, and I think other people would benefit from reading it too. And it might just be, once it's published, let people know where to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just for you to know that I was hesitant about should I or should not. So now you have my own feedback on that and my own response and how I feel about that. Maybe I wait a little bit, but I will be more than happy to share that with everybody. But for the time being, maybe wait.
That's fine. That's totally fine. Thank you,
Thank
Federico.
you
We'll see you next time.
Yeah,
all right.
I'm gonna be traveling. That's the point.
Oh.
So, but I'm gonna be trying. I mean, since we have a minute, we are supposed to be.
Actually, I've got to go. I'm over time. I've got another meeting.
So that's okay.
So you'll see the recording.
Please send one thing. Just send an hour before maybe the link for the webinar. The day it happens, because
so you needed a link for today.
Hard time this morning to go back to where I should go. What is the
I thought about that and I was like, people know where to go. Okay, I'll do that. I'll be sure to do that next time.
But if you are traveling, it might be difficult. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you, Federico. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.